Hey folks, I know I haven't posted in a while, and unfortunately I have to announce that the Garage Brewery is closed. That's because it's January and winter has set in. Everything has frozen over. I couldn't get water out to the garage if I wanted to. So, to extend my brewing season, I bought an Anvil Foundry 10.5. Now my intention for this video was kind of an assembly, first getting started with your Anvil Foundry after you open the box, but I discovered that some of the assembly that's described in the instructions has already been done, like the knob on the lid, for example. If yours is not already assembled, it's easy enough to do. Just the knob, a washer, another washer on the bottom, and a screw. Nothing to it. Now the next part that may need assembling is the valve on the outside and the rotating dip tube that goes on the inside of the kettle. Mine came already put together, but I took it apart to show you in case yours didn't. Nothing to it really. Now here's the valve and the dip tube all laid out in the way that it will be assembled. Take note though that there is an O-ring right here and an O-ring inside. I didn't take those apart because they're on there nice and snug. There's also an O-ring inside this nut that holds the barb on. This was already on there pretty tight, so again, I just left that alone. Now the valve goes in from the outside. Then from inside the foundry goes the O-ring and your nut to hold that in place, and then behind that goes your dip tube. Then all that's left to do is to assemble the handle with a lock washer and a nut. Okay, valve, O-ring, nut, and dip tube. And remember, there's an O-ring inside the nut on this dip tube as well. Alright. Then I'll put the handle on. Handle. Lock washer and nut. Now if you experience any leakage from around the base of the foundry, which is fairly common for these units, 90% of the time it's because of the ball valve. It's either too loose or it could be too tight. You want it loose enough to be able to rotate the racking arm inside, but you want it tight enough that you don't have leaks. So you may have to do some experimenting, filling the foundry, letting it sit for 15-20 minutes or so to see if there's any leakage, and just adjust this before you use it for good. Now here's a tip. Point the racking tube inside the kettle the same direction as the off position on your handle. That way you know which way it's pointing. If you want to point the dip tube down towards the bottom of the kettle, straight down, it's something like that. And if you want it higher to keep from picking up any trub or hop sediment, raise it up. You'll always know which way the dip tube is pointing. Now onto the mash basket, or the malt pipe as some people call it. There are two catches that mount here and here. with a small bolt, a washer, and a nut. Now the instructions will show you to mount this with the bolt from the outside and the nut and the washer on the inside. But here's a tip: if you ever plan on using a brew in the bag, reverse that. Your bag could catch on the end of this bolt and the washer and the nut, whereas if you reverse it, you've got the nice round head of the bolt on the inside, where you're less likely to catch your brew in the bag. Now at the end of your mash, you can lift your mash basket and set it there hands-free while everything drains, and you can sparge if you want. Now the assembly of your anvil foundry is complete. One other little thing to do is to take the film off of the screen, because condensation can get behind there and all of a sudden you think your screen is clouding over. You think there's stuff inside, when in reality it's just film that's clouding over.
Just one more thing.
Now there's one last part of the setup before you can plug in your anvil foundry, and that's to switch the power switch to 120 volts or 240 volts. Both the anvil foundry 6.5 and the 10.5 are capable of using either. But first, you have to switch the switch that is behind this plate to the proper voltage. I'm going to use 120 to start with, so I want to make sure that is pressed. And then screw this back tight so it cannot accidentally be bumped to the other. So that's it for setting up the anvil foundry. Now there is an immersion chiller that you may have gotten, and that's just a matter of using clamps to attach hoses to the ends of the immersion chiller, and there's a garden hose fitting for the cold water in. No big deal. So it's done, unless you also bought the recirculation pump. Now the recirculation kit comes with a perforated disc. The recirculating water pours on top, and the perforations help distribute the water evenly underneath so you don't get channeling. And it gets attached with just this little eye bolt and two nuts. Next there's a pump, which comes with a handy on-off switch. I like that. The Riptide pump from Blickman is just plug it in, it's on, unplug it to turn it off. The one thing about this pump is it's not very powerful, but it doesn't need to be really. This is plastic. You can get a stainless steel head at an extra cost, but I'm going to try it this way and see what happens. Then there is a piece of silicone tubing. The return tube, stainless steel, and that fits in the hole in the lid, which goes on top during the mash for your recirculation. Now the next thing I want to do is cut my hose. I only get one shot at this, so I want to make sure I got it right. I'm assembling it from the top down to make sure I have plenty of hose to reach the pump. Now the last part of the hose goes here, Don't forget your clamps. And here. So there it is, my Anvil Foundry 10.5 is all assembled. It's ready for use after a thorough cleaning and passivation. I can see right now that I left my outlet hose a little bit short. I don't have a lot of room to lift this in and out of the basket. So I'm going to have to get a new length of hose and fix that. But there it is. Take 4.